Thank you. Thanks for having me. Again, my name is Eric Shamlin. I'm managing director and executive producer of a company called Secret Location. We describe ourselves as a content studio for emerging platforms. That's kind of a clever way of saying we make content for pretty much every screen out there, both framed and frameless storytelling. We have TV shows in production, but we have a strong digital and game background, and that has led us to this world of VR and AR. Today's presentation, I'm going to focus more on the cinematic VR, or more the video VR. There are basically two flavors of VR right now. I'm sure you're all fairly well aware. There's essentially video VR and game engine VR. Video can be called rotational VR, 360 video VR, whatnot. And then game engine VR is, of course, the type of VR that is powered by the various game engines, Unity and Unreal and Crytek. The big trade-offs or the big differences between the two: video gives you photorealism, gives you real actors, gives you real locations, but no interactivity per se, whereas game engines give you full immersion, full interactivity, but the visual fidelity, the photorealism is quite lacking currently. So I'm going to do a quick clip reel, and then I'll get into sort of how we make some of the projects we've done, and then I'll do a few case studies. But I think the goal here for me is at least to kind of breeze through this. I always find that the questions are actually far more enlightening. So go through a quick clip reel.
I'm in the same class as my little brother and sister, but I can't even read or write.
I'm losing control of my family.
These are the tortured souls of the dead.
This place is not safe. Stay quiet.
So, like any traditional project, all your money is saved up front, saved in the Previz. The more you block it out, the more you think it out, think it through, talk it through, plan it, the better the results will be, but also the more aligned you'll be, and ultimately the more money you're going to put on the screen instead of wasting it just talking about it. So one thing we did very early on is we developed our own storyboarding system. Traditional 16:9 boards are less useful in VR, so we always start with basically a diorama of what we're trying to capture. This allows us to sort of plan it and talk about it in sort of quadrants, north, south, east, and west, so that if a viewer is looking one direction or another, we know, and we'll have a kind of beat-by-beat breakdown of what's going on in each of the quadrants, so we can really time it out. There's a lot of sort of challenges in VR that I think everybody's kind of learning on their own. A lot of the companies that are doing this go through a lot of trial and error. For instance, I guess about a year ago, 2 years ago, there were these weird rules that you couldn't edit in VR, or edit would be particularly problematic. We found that's actually not true. We can edit just like you can in traditional film. One way to think about it, though, is less about editing frame to frame, and I think the Google Story Labs put it as editing in VR is more world to world or environment to environment. And so you just have to be aware of that when you do edit in VR. A good example is, take a shot of a crowd in an auditorium sitting, watching someone blabber on, and then you cut to the frame to the next frame where the exact same crowd in that auditorium, but now the floor has fallen out beneath them, and they're all in free fall. In traditional film, that's kind of a shock. In VR, that's post-traumatic. That's very, very impactful. So you just have to be kind of aware or more careful in how you edit in VR. The other big challenge in VR that comes up quite frequently when we partner with established filmmakers or brands and studios is a question about how you guide the viewer. Like, how do you know where they'll look, or how do you make sure they'll be looking where you want them to at any given moment? While at first blush it sounds like a great question, it's actually one that, after you've done it a few times, you realize is not really worth spending all that much time thinking about. Just like you've walked into this room, you spend the first 10 seconds getting acclimatized to the room, but I don't think you've failed to figure out where to look. And that's the same is true in virtual reality. Yes, it's a 360 world, but if you are doing your job as a storyteller, they're going to follow you. And we basically call it the first 10-second rule. First 10 seconds of any scenario, or at least the first time they were visiting a scene, we give them 10 seconds to acclimatize. They figure out where the exits are, what the environment auspices are. But once they've sort of acclimatized to the scene, they'll go with you. They'll follow you wherever you want to go. Then you have additional tools in your toolkit: audio, lighting cues, all kinds of other tools to help guide them. But for the most part, if you're doing your storytelling properly, they'll follow you. So once you've kind of blocked out the key beats, north, south, east, and west of a scene, we go into more traditional storyboarding, where we'll do 16:9 frames of sort of the hero frame, or the primary field of view, as we call it. The rest of the quadrants are, not quite as important as the primary field of view. We start on paper, drop a frame. We'll then go into a game engine and start mocking it up, trying to figure out what the lighting is, particularly for any directional light, so that we can then match that on set when we shoot the talent. And then finally, we composite the talent into the same game environment. So again, a lot of thought was put up front so that the day of the shoot, we ended up only spending maybe 3 hours on a set trying to capture this for an experience that, for the run of the experience, it took us 3 months to build. But the shoot was very quick and fairly inexpensive because of all the pre-planning that went into it. Sorry, my laptop just locked up. The next big challenge you get into for cinematic VR is camera selection. There are no good off-the-shelf cameras right now. Right now, the state-of-the-art is building your own. On the left is a 14-camera GoPro rig. In the middle is a 6-camera. Those are kind of two ends of the spectrum. On the right, you've got a 6-camera rig as well. This is pretty much state-of-the-art. This is what most shoots are using these days. You drop in your GoPros. The big problem with the 14 one is, of course, it's 14 separate cameras, so you have to start and stop 14 separate cameras at the beginning of every shot, which is very painful. And then once you get the footage, you go into a new process called stitching, where you then, basically using paint software, you take the 14 GoPros, 7 for the left eye, 7 for the right eye, and stitch them into separate spheres for playback to create the stereoscopic depth. But for those that don't want to go that far, you can go mono. Mono doesn't. The big difference here is mono flattens out your image. Stereo, of course, gives you the 3-dimensional depth that you get from going to like a 3D movie or whatnot. But mono is a good sort of entry-level way to get into this. Many VR purists don't really consider this VR because of that lack of stereo depth. But nonetheless, to learn how to shoot for VR, these are great solutions. Far left is the Ricoh Theta. I've got the bubble cam. Probably my favorite is the Kodak Pix Pro. I think it's one of the better ones if you're going to be playing around on YouTube 360 or Facebook 360. Excellent quality. And then in the next month or so, Nikon's going to release their Key Mission 360. These are all kind of consumer level cameras. So if you're doing any sort of heavy post-production or visual effects finishing, these are not going to get you very far. If you're going to go and try and do any post-production, you're going to want to step up your mono game. So on the left is a 10-camera rig of Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cams. On the right is a 4-camera rig of Sony AS7 IIs. These are arguably some of the better rigs available out there, but obviously not off the shelf. These are very much build them yourself. Step up from that, you get 4 reds on the left, and then I believe this is the head case mount. These are all, again, these are all mono. None of these are stereo rigs at this point. It's very, once you get above GoPros, it's very hard to shoot stereo. There are solutions, but most of them are proprietary. Right now, on the left, you have the Jaunt 1, the Nokia Ozo, and then the Samsung Project Beyond. These are all stereo cameras, but these aren't cameras you can go out and just get. You have to partner with Jaunt to use theirs, and then Ozo, I think, is just now shipping to some rental shops, and then Project Beyond, I think, has been delayed indefinitely. A few cameras that are a bit more exotic. On the left is the GoPro Odyssey or the Google Jump, depending on how you want to frame it. There's a partnership between Google and GoPro. GoPro is supplying the cameras, and then you would basically, it would be connected to the cloud. You'd upload the footage, and then Google would auto-stitch it and supply you your footage. In the middle is Matterport. This is much more exotic. This is actually a sort of a radar or LiDAR type technology where it's actually scanning the environment and giving you full depth capability. So eventually you're going to be able to take that into a game engine and actually be able to tour the set from a camera captured image. And on the right is the Lytro Emerge, which is doing a similar thing. This is a light field camera. Currently captures not only the RGB field, but also captures Z depth for each of the pixels. So then you can take that into your software and render out fully navigable environments. The problem is that the file sizes for the Lytro are very, very unwieldy at this point. Then you can get really exotic with pairs of reds. Some of the bigger shoots that are going on right now use not necessarily this rig, this is kind of absurd, but stereo reds is very common for high-end VR. This was, I think, a test by a company called NextVR. They do live streaming, and I think they built this as kind of a gag to see if they could pull it off, but I don't know that anybody actively uses a camera like that. All right, so next we'll go into some of the case studies. We split our work into 3 basic groups. We're big advocates of, I guess, what's now being called VRX, which are basically that hybrid of entertainment and game engine. Today it's largely been marketing extension work for entertainment properties. We've done a number of these now. The second group of projects would be more cause-related or journalism, documentary type stuff. We feel that that's a very good use case for VR right now. And then third, of course, is the originals, which we're very excited about. I'm going to try not to be too self-promotional here. I'm just going to kind of rip through some of the case studies so you can see some of the work we've done. This past fall, we were awarded the first Primetime Emmy ever given to a VR experience, and it was for our partnership with Sleepy Hollow, or partnership with Fox for their Sleepy Hollow franchise. This was a project we did nearly 2 years ago for Comic-Con 2014. Comic-Con 2014 was kind of a coming out for VR in general. It was the first major event that any Oculus headset was touched by the public. And we had one of the maybe 4 or 5 installations there. I think it was the biggest. It was a massive hit for Fox, for the show, and then obviously for us. The Emmy was kind of icing on the cake. Obviously it was a big kudo for us, but it also meant that the Academy was going to take this medium seriously. So it was kind of a good validation for what we're all trying to do. I'm going to play a quick case study.
The Sleepy
Hollow virtual reality experience is an innovative, narrative-driven fan experience that debuted at San Diego Comic-Con 2014 in support of the hit Fox series. Combining Oculus Rift technology, a custom-built app, and an atmospheric live setting, Secret Location created an immersive, one-of-a-kind installation that thrilled thousands of excited visitors and reached millions in social media. The cutting-edge VR experience utilized top-quality CGI graphics, 360-degree sound, and live-action video to deliver a gripping narrative that plunged users deep into the world of Sleepy Hollow.
Stay with him, Mom. In dark, in the fog, he might protect you.
Through the magic of virtual reality, visitors found themselves in the show's spooky graveyard setting, receiving a dire warning from the main character, Ichabod Crane, moments before a hair-raising encounter with the Headless Horseman. The experience thrilled visitors and generated huge buzz at Comic-Con, as well as socially through a custom digital souvenir. To capture the experience for attendees, we built a custom mobile app that created personalized images for each visitor to the installation, creating engaging content directly out of the event. The app took visitors' photos and automatically composited them into a pre-designed backdrop from the virtual reality scene they were watching in the Oculus Rift, along with tune-in details for the second season airings. By the time the scene was over, the finished souvenir images were already on display at the event and sent to the user's email or Twitter accounts, enhancing the Impulse social pass-along. The final piece was designing the whole installation around Fox's eye-catching Sleepy Hollow Bridge for maximum exposure and participation. Over the entire production process, Secret Location worked hand-in-hand with Fox for a deeply authentic experience. We collaborated with the showrunners and writers to capture the tone of the series, resulting in an engaging narrative that is firmly grounded in the world of Sleepy Hollow. Key to this was Secret Location filming show lead Tom Meisen's original performance in live-action 3D and incorporating it into the virtual environment for a totally unique fan experience. In fact, this was the first time live-action and CG animation had been combined in virtual reality for a television series or a film project. The Sleepy Hollow virtual reality experience offered something new and thrilling and received a massive response from fans and the media. Over 4 days at Comic-Con, thousands of people took part, including cast members from the show, creating millions of media impressions online and socially, enabling a totally unique experience for a legion of loyal fans and those new to the series.
Coming off the heels of Sleepy Hollow, we got a lot of press, and then a lot of other partnerships came out of it. So the LA Phil is the orchestra, obviously in LA. They have a beautiful venue called the Walt Disney Concert Hall. And they came to us and asked what we could do in VR to help promote classical music. Every year they have the same struggle many traditional organizations do of trying to raise awareness, trying to get younger kids, teenagers in to watch classical concerts. And they have this sort of unique fund that allows them to build sort of new media or leverage new technology to promote classical music. And so this year they wanted to use it to do something in VR. So they reached out, asked us what sort of ideas we had, and we pitched them a number of ideas. The one that ultimately won was this sort of Fantasia-style light show, a battle of good versus evil. So what we did was we ended up shooting the first 3 minutes of Beethoven's Fifth, and then compositing this sort of allegorical light show in and around the concert. It traveled, I think, all over LA. It was a big success for them press-wise, and then I think it ultimately traveled to New York. Here's a small case study to discuss.
In 2015, we teamed up with the LA Philharmonic to create a first-of-its-kind virtual reality experience called Orchestra VR. Working in close collaboration with the LA Phil team, we blended live action 360 3D footage with story-driven animation to bring people inside music like never before.
Wow.
The orchestra was led by celebrated conductor Gustavo Dudamel, bringing unparalleled passion to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Viewers are transported to the Walt Disney Concert Hall for a private performance. The viewer's perspective shifts between different vantage points in the hall, while colorful animated spirits visualize the music all around them. We used spherical cameras to create a 360-degree, 3D stereoscopic view, moving the cameras between takes to capture a variety of angles. To accommodate the in-demand orchestra, the shoot had to be accomplished in less than an hour, an exciting logistical challenge. We placed several binaural and directional microphones all around the concert hall to collect audio from different perspectives. The result is a dynamic audio experience that responds when a user turns their head, heightening the sense of immersion.
I think it's the most dramatic beginning in the history of music. Beethoven opens to you the door to go inside of your essence, but to arrive there, you have to go individually.
The experience was loaded into a van and driven around Los Angeles. The aim was to make the orchestra accessible to as many communities as possible and invite a whole new audience to experience music in a powerful and visual new way.
So one quick note on that one. So for those of you that do a lot of shoots, we were given 1 hour to shoot it. We had the morning to set up, prep as much as we needed to, but then 1 hour to actually shoot with the orchestras. And then the piece of music is a little over 3 minutes long. And I think we got six takes. But ultimately the reason we had an hour was because the orchestra was union. And if we went into overtime, the shoot went from free to $100,000 if we went into the second hour. So they got 1 hour for promotional shoots or promotional use. So that was some very astute producing on our team's side. Ball up. So we think that sports will also be a very compelling use case for VR. I know there are a number of companies out there that are seriously pursuing it. We decided to play around with it. This was a promotional project we did for a street competition basketball television show. I'll say the big learning coming off of doing this was sports in VR can be very boring. One thing that sports, we're all trained to watch sports on TV. You have the commentators, you have the overlays, you have the instant replays, you have all of this sort of production value that goes into modern televised sports. You don't have any of that in VR currently. We can place you on the court, we can place you at the 50-yard line, but then that's it. It's just like having really bad seats. Potentially, it's or really boring neighbors because you're not able to talk to anybody. So right now, the curated experience is very lacking for VR sports. But that said, once they fix the sort of commentator and overlay, the instant replay aspects of VR sports, it's going to be an incredibly compelling medium. I'm going to zip through a couple of these. I want to get into some of the more documentary-based stuff we're doing. News and documentary and cause-related VR, we believe, gets a whole new life in virtual reality. It's that sense of presence, that sense of teleportation, placing you someplace you will never be able to go on your own. We partnered with Frontline and PBS to do a documentary on the sort of ground zero of the Ebola virus. We went to this city or little village where they tracked down patient zero and then dramatized the spread of the virus using a mix of 360 3D footage and some of the traditional 16:9 footage. This was, as far as we know, this is one of the first use cases of kind of using both types of footage in one piece. And again, it's the sense of presence that makes it ultimately compelling. Putting you there in the camp as it's going into triage to fight or track this disease is something that's more emotionally affecting than you might realize, and definitely much more affecting than a traditional 16:9 telling would give. Here's a quick excerpt from that piece.
In late 2013, a microscopic virus began a deadly journey. It was the beginning of the worst Ebola outbreak in history.
If you go to the morgue, you see dead bodies, 15, 16, 17, 18, dead bodies all in body bags.
We lit a fire and they fell from the top of the tree. Then we ate them.
We had the idea that Ebola was something which was severe, but typically occurred in a certain way and then could be handled.
Her burial will cause an explosion of new cases.
When she died, we washed the whole body.
Extremely horrible because people are dying sometimes very distressing deaths beside a child.
So I was afraid it would just be this like black plague with this inexorable spread across the continent and beyond.
Ebola was not an exception. Ebola is a precedent.
That project has since led to a partnership with Facebook and Frontline to do 5 more pieces of similar scope and scale. It's something we're very, very proud of, and think, of course, documentary and cause-related journalism can really shine brightly in VR. Coming off the tails of that project, we were honored to be invited to the World Economic Forum this past January in Davos. We were asked by a large charity called Project Literacy to dramatize what it would be like to suffer from illiteracy, or to struggle to read, rather. And so they asked us to put you in the shoes of somebody that can't read. So we shot 3 short pieces. The first, we put you in the shoes of a young Indian girl in a rural Indian village where, you know, a girl's education is very much devalued. And she's at an age where she now must decide whether to stay in school, catch up to her peers, or likely be married off. The second of the 3 it takes place in England. It puts you in the shoes of a 20-something English male as he's caught in a fight with his best friend. And the theme of that one is how literacy often limits your job choices and often sort of condemns people to a life of crime. And then in the third one, we put you in the shoes of a Midwest American mother who's always struggled with her weight, and her career options have been very limited. And so we put you in the shoes as she's feeding her family. And the theme to that one is how being illiterate often leads to malnutrition. And malnutrition in the developed world isn't starving, it isn't thin babies, it's overweight, it's empty calories and obesity. We told them through these frozen moments, using photography and matte paintings to really convey this sort of moment in the life of these people struggling with illiteracy. Previz was critical to pull off this sort of technique. This is the grayscale game engine render for the Indian classroom. Then we recreated it with Indian students. Here's the previs of the young Englishman. This is his best friend turning on him with a fist in his face. As you fade up from black in the experience, you have a fist in your face. Each of the little reticles triggers additional audio. It's all told through inner dialogue. It's how these people recounting how they ended up at this point in their life. And then the third one, Midwest American mother struggling to feed her kids properly. Here's the previs board, and then the final shot. We have 2 offices. I lead the LA office, where we do more of the entertainment work. Our larger home office is in Toronto. We're 60 people there. Being Canadian, we're sort of blessed with an abundance of natural resources there. And we've been invited by the national government to document the vast wealth of natural flora and fauna in VR. So we're now going on a year-long project documenting the various wildlife in Canada. It's going to be very large effort that we hope to debut before Christmas this year. We partnered with Ed Norton. He's got a startup called CrowdRise. It's a crowdfunding site for charities and nonprofits. We built to raise awareness around the charities. We decided to build a virtual city that you can tour in virtual reality. And in the middle of the virtual city is a tower that represents all the donations raised by the charities. And as the campaign went on, or as the charities were donated to, the tower would grow, and then we would show its height in comparison to many famous landmarks: Eiffel Tower, the CN Tower, the Burj Dubai. And then finally, the last of the documentary pieces, we were invited to travel to China this past year to document the building or the groundbreaking of the world's most advanced wind farm. China, as I'm sure you're aware, has been struggling with pollution. Pretty much the entire eastern seaboard of China is socked in with the thickest smog you can imagine. But Western China is still pretty pristine, and they know it, and they know the clock is ticking, and so they're fighting very hard to sort of prevent the pollution from socking in the rest of the country. So we were invited with a drone team and many other fun tools to document the beauty of the Western China landscape and show you the building of these massive turbines. Here are some of the storyboards we used to convey it. We wanted to get on top of a turbine with one of the cameras. And then we wanted to figure out what a split screen would look like in VR as well. So we tried to play that and figure out how that would work. It didn't work, actually, once we got into the edit. It's really kind of a mess. Sorry, this is the last one. We're actually on another year-long project. We're partnered with the United Nations to send a team to South Africa to document rhino poaching. And we're busting open the entire ecosystem. From the poachers themselves, which are kind of a red herring. The moment you capture one poacher, 3 others line up, so it's kind of an endless supply of people willing to pull the trigger. But the more nefarious people are the arms smugglers, largely from the Czech Republic, and then the rhino horn smugglers themselves. And so the United Nations is looking to bust open the entire ecosystem. It's about 7 different points along the path of rhino horns. And we've been with them for the past year documenting it, and we're hoping to debut this project here this coming year, this coming year at Sundance. Then the last section of work we do, and we're very excited about, is our originals projects. Right now, to date, the only way to really make money has been in the marketing extension work. A lot of the stuff we've done so far, looked at so far, is really kind of out of marketing budgets. But as a company, we're trying to figure out how you actually monetize and make money in this new medium. And so we think we're placing a few smart bets. We've partnered with a group called the Blackout Team. They do live horror experiences, I guess is probably the best way to describe that. They basically take over abandoned apartment buildings or warehouses, set up shop, you pay $40 and they just scare the crap out of you. It's not G or PG rated, it's very, very explicit stuff. They have a big cult following in the States at least, and we've partnered with them to develop a VR franchise. We think horror, just because of the early adopter demographic, we believe horror is going to be a big market, at least in the early days. We're not immune to the games allure either. Having done enough VR now, we've had to build up our game development team. Even any level of interactivity in VR requires game engine skills. And so we built up that team, those skills, and so we decided we'd figure out what sort of games we could build. And our first is called Blasters of the Universe. We're hoping to launch that here this fall. And then finally, the project we're most proud of right now is we have the first hybrid VR TV show out there called Halcyon. We shot the pilot this past January. It's a near future police procedural where crimes are now happening in virtual reality. And so the show will unfold as a show does, telling you the investigative cop drama, but then for each episode you'll be able to download the crime scene where the crimes are happening now in VR and experience or help put together the crime as it unfolds. We've partnered with Sci-Fi to do this. It'll debut this July, and I hope you'll rush out and buy it. Quick little teaser trailer, and then we'll do some questions.
Switch your headset. We reimagined our VR hardware from the ground up to create a virtual experience so lifelike it's indistinguishable from reality. Our predictive gigapixel display delivers crystalline visuals at a refresh rate faster than the human eye. And polyfilament fibers embedded in a nanocarbon shell produce the most progressive latency scaling ever achieved. The result is total freedom in the virtual space and the final evolution of VR. We're Halcyon, and we invite you to open your eyes.
Great. Thanks so much, Eric. So we're a little over time again now, but so much interesting stuff there. I'm afraid we can only squeeze in one question, but there's brilliant. First on the ball, the chap with the black glasses there. I think you may have to mob Eric afterwards, because I imagine there's probably a few things people want to talk to you about.
Yeah, sorry about that, going over.
Hello, my question's about stereoscopic 360 and 360. I'm presuming some of your stuff's 360 and some of it's stereoscopic 360.
Yeah.
When do you decide, do you have a threshold of budget on whether you decide to do it stereoscopic or not? Have you had many problems with stereoscopic? How difficult, just expanding on
Yeah, no, that's probably the best question if we've only got one. So, we try to do stereoscopic if at all possible. With that sense of depth, that sense of spatial depth you get with mono or stereo is, we think, kind of vital for that sense of presence. But whether to do mono or stereo it's kind of a budget question. It's also a delivery mechanism or delivery question. If you're going, a lot of the clients now want to go Facebook 360 or YouTube 360. Those are mono platforms. So if you're going to those destinations, there's no reason to shoot stereo. It's just a waste of effort. In terms of outside of that, when do you go stereo or mono? It is a budget question, but it's a camera question more than anything. As I sort of alluded to, the only way to do stereo currently on any sort of reasonable budget is GoPros, but then you're undermining your image quality because of the lens quality and the compression. You can do stereo with higher level cameras, Reds, we've done it now, but then your budget blows up. So the trend now at the higher end is to still shoot mono. That's where some of the more exotic mono rigs come from, and then do post-conversion to 3D. Same way Hollywood films do it now. Almost no Hollywood film shoots stereo these days. They shoot mono and post-convert to 3D.
Great, thanks so much. So sorry I have to make that the last question. Yeah, brilliant stuff, Eric.